Guys, today I'm going to talk about who has the best cordless barrel grip jigsaw. We recently published round 1 of our jigsaw head-to-head, and that featured a variety of battery-powered D-handled jigsaws. And if you haven't seen that, you got to see it. But D-handled jigsaws are not the only type of saw in the market. Many pro users, many of you folks, reached out and asked questions about what about barrel grip. So we designed round 2 of our head-to-head, and it's all about barrel-handled battery-powered saws, and we used many of the same rigorous tests from the round 1 that we did. For example, we looked at several different categories. We looked at, once again, we looked at precision and accuracy because it's important for the saw. Performance, which was speed and power, features, ergonomics, and price. Each of the categories is ranked individually, but then at the end, we combine it for the combined score result of the best saw. If you're like Toolbox Buzz crew member Ethan Bickford and you geek out on all the specs and finer details, he's our Rain Man. You can go and get all that information, testing criteria, the rig, more information about the rig we used at the website Toolbox Buzz article. The website always has more information. Okay, for the accuracy category, each jigsaw was ranked in accuracy for the following areas. We looked at line of sight, blade tracking, bevel at 45, crosscut at 90 degrees. The majority of factors that basically affect the accuracy of a jigsaw basically depends on how well you can see the line of cut and how well the blade stays square to the workpiece. That's it. Or maybe at a fixed angle like a bevel cut. So it's that simple. It's just those 2 factors. Generally, a jigsaw with less body overhang, the blade is easier to see and use. You know, you can see that blade easier, especially when you're working in cramped quarters or maybe trying to do a curved line like a scroll cut. Now, to be consistent, all of our jigsaws were equipped with new Diablo 3¼ inch 20-tooth TPI scrolling blades and also 4-inch TPI fine finish wood blades. One test that we used to check the line of sight was scroll cutting. We also looked at straight cuts. Each saw was set to maximum speed, 0 orbital action. And a scroll cutting template was used, and we traced all of our lines to stay consistent, and each jigsaw was used to make numerous cuts in 3/4 inch poplar and some maple and mahogany, I think we used. The DeWalt and Makita both had excellent cut line visibility. Makita was the best performing saw in the scroll cuts. Milwaukee had a great cut line visibility. It was good, but not great. Hilti's dust shroud got in the way of the line of sight, and we removed it, and we all agreed that if we owned that saw, that shroud would be off permanently. The Festool saw was difficult to see. The small size Diablo blade got lost visually in the inside V groove of that blade guard on the Festool. When cutting bevels, the DeWalt saw had the best bevel sightline. Makita sightlines were slightly obscured, and the Festool in Milwaukee had terrible sightlines on the bevel. The Hilti sightline was good, but the LED light was blocked when set at a bevel. It just blocks it. The body blocks it. Looking at clean cutting, getting clean cuts on a jigsaw with light splintering or tear out of the surface and chipping and all that, it's mostly a matter of the blade you select designed for that job, right? So the DeWalt, Hilti, Makita pretty much produced the cleanest cut at the cutting edge and the least amount of tear out. This clean cut result is also due to the fact that some of those Diablo blades are just fantastic, but also operator skill set when using the tool. The Festool in Milwaukee surprised us with the rougher cuts. Okay, look, we looked at blade deflection. Every cut was measured and evaluated for blade deflection at 45 and 90. Now, on the 90, the Milwaukee ranked the best, followed by Makita and Festool. On the 45-degree cuts, Makita ranked the best, followed by Festool and Milwaukee. They're just trading places here. Blade tracking. Tracking was evaluated to see the lines, the following lines, and see how well and hard it was to follow the line, as well as the blade. Milwaukee, Festool, DeWalt were the best tracking jigsaws, and it's worth noting that when scoring the line of sight, points were awarded on the operator's ability to consistently see the line when cutting through poplar or maple. Points were not awarded if they went off the line. basically off the template cut line. And basically this was to ensure that we did not, operate error. We want to minimize that in our evaluation from the person, the cutter, going off their own line. Accuracy. The winner of that was Makita. Makita scored in the top 3 out of 4 categories. Clean cuts, tracking, 45-degree blade deflection, and came in second place in the 90-degree deflection. It scored a near perfect score of 5 points and is truly a nice cutting jigsaw. It was my favorite. The Festool scored 11 points. DeWalt tied with Makita with 13 points. Hilti did not fare well in this testing, coming in at 18 points. All right, we moved from accuracy stuff to performance testing. We looked at power and speed. An obvious question when comparing the performance of different jigsaws is which saw cuts fastest. Not always important to everybody, but some want to know. The test also equates to power, and power equates to cutting thicker, harder to cut materials. Recognizing that using jigsaws requires the operator to make dozens, if not hundreds, of minuscule adjustments during each cut, we decided to just eliminate human error. We couldn't have that. So to test power, we built a jig to hold the saws and pull the saws through 3/4 inch plywood using a weighted pulley system. Each saw again was fitted with the Diablo 5-inch 6 TPI fast cutting wood blade designed specifically for fast rough cutting. We used our jig to remove as much human variability as possible to allow the fairest capabilities-based test we could come up with. We use natural, consistent force via weight to provide straight, equal, frictionless track. And basically that allows the saws to cut as fast as they could with less friction. The track we made was beautiful, glided. The saw's power, the motor power, provided consistent strokes per minute for speed. The sled fixture held the saw securely in those aluminum tracks and kept the saw in that consistent parallel fashion. The saws were in contact with the sled and the sled was in contact with the workpiece. All right, so now that we described the jig, the winner of our performance test was Milwaukee. We ranked the performance testing by normalizing watt hours. Milwaukee came in on top, followed by Hilti and Festool. When watching this test, all of us, all the crew members commented on the Milwaukee speed. And when you see that, that's first impression. It's like, wow, that thing's powerful. The saws all came in at different size packs, right? Energy power plants, different battery voltages, amp hour ratings, all that different stuff. So as you can imagine, the saw with the greatest watt hour battery theoretically has a leg up maybe on its competition in regard to performance, maybe. In this way though, the reader can see which saw has the most effective combination of battery technology, stamina, motor power on a per watt basis. So that's why we did that. All right, we looked at features. The winner of that was the DeWalt. Comparing features is never easy and the devil is always in the details, but you certainly have to look at features. We looked at 9 of them. These saws are all rich in features and we ranked the features individually 1 through 5, 1 being the best. We looked at grip and trigger, soft start, variable speed dials, selectable blade orbits. We looked at the blade guide system, which is important. We looked at the blade change clamp. We looked at the shoe plate, tilting shoe plates. We looked at the dust blower, dust collection, and LED light. Now, the DeWalt scored on top in 4 categories. It came in second in 1 category and third in 2 categories. Pretty much right at the top for 12 points. A real close place. Second place was the Makita with 13 points, with first and second places in almost every category. Third place went to Milwaukee with 14 points. But let's actually look at some of these details. Let's just look a little bit closer because some of them are nice to talk about. So let's talk about the grip and trigger. The grip is probably the most important part because the user comfort comes into play, right? A solid grip is essential for controlling the movement during tool cutting. In general, over molds are softer and easy to touch and grip than plastics, and they provide a more secure grip and more dampening, tool vibration dampening. The Hilti had a superior grip with well-placed overmolding and a comfortable finger placement. The team favored the smaller diameter barrel, which allowed for full finger grasp around it. The Makita also had a really nice grip, And the team was split on the trigger stuff. So the Makita has a split safety trigger feature, and it requires you to turn the power on the saw and then with a separate button, turn the saw on. The crew members were split on the switch, some thinking it was an unnecessary additional step and did not like having to press the button before the tool started. 50-50 split. All right, let's talk about soft start or auto start. Now, the Makita Jigsaw has a soft start motor electronics that start the motor at a slow level and stays at a low speed until the tool basically starts to cut the material. In general, a soft start can basically prevent the saw from suddenly jerking if maybe you start cutting with the blade and it's in contact with the material, something like that. But once that saw engages the material, the RPMs ramp up. Now, the Festool in Milwaukee have an A symbol on their variable speed dial that basically also starts the saw at a lower RPM speed, and that also ramps up when that blade engages the material being cut. Now, variable speed dials, all of the jigsaws have variable speed dials. Variable speed dials basically going to allow you to set the upper limit motor of the saw and hence the number of blade strokes per minute. This makes the saw more versatile when you're cutting. It's a more versatile cutting machine. You can cut with different materials and thicknesses and hardnesses. The team liked the variable speed dial on the DeWalt because it allowed a left or right-handed user to adjust the speed while cutting. It also should be noted that this dial is not easily visible and you could accidentally hit it with your finger during hand movement. The team also liked the top-sided variable speed dial on the hilti. Now this location allows you to see the dial and easily adjust it with your non-support hand. The Milwaukee variable speed dial is on the low left side of the saw and is not protected. It's not recessed or have a shroud around it. So as a result, if you're maneuvering your hands on a jigsaw, which we often do, like coping crown or something, you might tweak that or touch that dial inadvertently. The Festool and Milwaukee were the only saws with selectable auto settings that allowed you to start at a lower speed and ramp up in the material. We already talked about that. Okay, the Makita feature is automatic and cannot be turned off. I do want to mention that. The other ones have the A thing. We looked at selectable blade orbits. Now, the mechanism moves the blade forward slightly during the upstroke cut, resulting basically in more aggressive cutting action than if the blade just reciprocated straight up and down. The mechanism also moves the saw blade back slightly so that it actually clears the kerf during the return downstroke and saves wear and tear on the blade. Now, adjusting the amount of blade orbit makes the saw more or less cut more or less aggressively. All of the saws had a selectable blade orbit, and all of the saws, with the exception of the hilti, have a rotary selector lever or dial. The hilti has a linear selector switch, which was out of the way and way more friendly to left-handed users. Okay, so we moved on to blade guide system. So most of the saws use a grooved wheel guide system where the blade goes into the grooved wheel, and they keep the blade in alignment pretty good. The Festool has a true blade guide system. Say that 3 times fast. It's a smooth wheel, like the other saws, with a V-shaped metal guide that contacts and stabilizes the backside of the blade, and it keeps it from deflecting during cutting and can be adjusted. All of these jigsaw features have tool-free blade change systems which allow you to safely and easily change the blade without touching them. It's like a spring-loaded clamp. As far as the blade change clamp levers, all of them allow toolless changes, employing the lever to release that saw plunger. But 3 saws basically stood out. Festool's Fast Fix, the Hilti and Makita mechanisms also were terrific, and that spring-loaded was awesome. So those 3 stood out. The spring eject basically is going to save you from burning your fingers from touching that hot blade, from prolonged cutting. We've all done that. The Hilti lever, it has a solid, heavy-duty feel with a very powerful ejection. The DeWalt blade will basically fall out when held down, but the ejection was not that strong. It doesn't really shoot the blade out. DeWalt rattles also when you back up in a workpiece when you're cutting. We showed that on the first head-to-head. Most blade clamps use a twist lock, so when pressure is applied to the back of the blade, generally the worst thing that happens is it might jump, in the blade guide. But the blade clamp on the DeWalt actually releases the linear action that is in line with that blade. So this means that the blade is pushed backwards. Or I should say, when you push that blade backwards, you back the saw up a little bit, like maybe making a complicated cut and doing a relief cut. It starts to release the blade clamp a little bit and pushes on that blade clamp release lever. And it makes, when the saw is running, it makes an alarming rattling noise. And I could definitely see this causing problems with aggressively moving the saw around when making a tight cut. So DeWalt should really look at that. All right, moving on to tilting shoe plate. Adjusting the angle of the shoe plate allows the user to make bevel cuts, right? Say for the edge of a board when you're scribing baseboard or something. All of the saws, with the exception of the DeWalt, require an Allen wrench to adjust the base, or a separately purchased accessory. Now, of all the saws requiring an Allen wrench, the Makita was the only saw with an onboard stored Allen wrench, which was nice. Nice job, Makita. The DeWalt bevel lever was easy to use, easy to manipulate, and the tilting release adjusted, locked easily, quickly. It was great. The Festool, unfortunately, comes with a fixed base. If you want to bevel this saw, you need to purchase an additional accessory kit. The kit has an adjustable base controlled by a knob. It's pretty damn cool. It's like a butterfly, or it's split, and it bevels like a butterfly fashion right down the middle. So it bevels down the middle, it pivots. And this is fine for really nice cuts in the middle of a board and stuff like that, but it could be a problem when beveling near the edge of a workpiece. So just keep that in mind, because it will hit the workpiece. All right, moving on to dust blower and dust collection. All of the saws feature dust blowers that basically channel air from the motor fan and blow it out in front of the blade. The dust blowers, overall, they just do okay at removing dust. We still have to blow it off, right? The Milwaukee has a switch. You can turn it on or off, which is a nice option. The Hilti had the most powerful blower, which was nice. Built-in LED lighting. All of the saws have LED lighting. Some are better than others. The Makita allows you to turn the LED light on without activating the blade. That's nice. And the team felt that light could be brighter. The best LED was the Milwaukee saw, and it has a bright full circle halo that surrounds the entire saw with no shadow lines. The Festool was similar in brightness, but did not throw out the same size halo. The Festool has a really large halo, but not as bright, and it does have some shadows at the guard area as well. Also, Festool has that strobe light that can be synchronized with the blade, so that you can look and see the blade almost moving slowly. And while this is an interesting feature, the team really did not find it to have any real-world application. We weren't wowed by it. DeWalt and Milwaukee have bright, well-placed lights slightly ahead of the blade, and that was the smart part. Put it ahead of the blade. The sight lines on the DeWalt could be better due to that blade guide, and maybe higher and out of the way, but it was still good. We looked at the power lock-on switches. Barrel grips by nature are lock-on switches. The DeWalt and Hilti have well-protected mechanical slide switches, which are the least likely to be accidentally turned on. Now, despite not being ambidextrous, these two saws are pretty easy to operate with your index finger, your offhand. The Festool and Milwaukee also have ambidextrous electronic slide switches. So Festool being the better of the two with a kind of an angled down throw, angled down, and you can hit it with your thumb easily. Milwaukee switch, I want to talk about that for a minute. It's a little bit high, and it is very easily activated when you pick up the saw. So additionally, it has a little bit of a hair trigger, meaning that the switch will engage the power of the saw if the switch is only just touched a little bit, like 1/8 of an inch of throw. While there is a delay in that switch activation, the fact that this tool can be inadvertently bumped or mishandled while holding it, potentially injuring somebody or bending the blade or ruining a workpiece. So Milwaukee, you need to look at that. I picked the saw up a couple times with my hands and turned it on, and I did not intend for that to happen. Ergonomics. So the winner of that went to Hilti and Makita. Ergonomics, right? The science of designing and producing tools that improve efficiency, reduce discomfort, fatigue, and injury. Hilti and Makita tied in ergonomics with 6 points. Now, which was 4 points ahead of the Festool and 7 points ahead of the DeWalt. Hilti had the best grip, tied on blade change, and was the most friendly to lefties. Makita had the best and safest trigger and tied for best blade change. Okay, then we moved on to vibration. The winner of that was Festool. Regardless of how fast a jigsaw cuts, The less vibration it produces, the better. All jigsaws employ some sort of counterbalance system to reduce that up and down plunger vibration. Some are better than others. During our speed testing, we wanted to collect the data relative to vibration for what each saw would produce. So to accomplish that, we basically we attach an accelerometer sensor to record average and peak vibration readings for each run. Based on our testing, the top 3 saws for the least amount of vibration were Festool, DeWalt, and Hilti. One interesting thing to note though, the entire team felt when they were using the tools throughout the days that the Makita was the smoothest, least vibrating tool, with the Hilti right behind it. The Festool was the smoothest cutting saw with the least amount of vibrations, but it had more vibrations than we thought when you actually used it. So I thought that was interesting. We agreed not to test dust collection on the jigsaw, and I'll tell you why. During our discussions, we agreed that we usually use jigsaws for scribing finishing cuts, finishing something on table saw, circular saw, cutting operations. All of these cuts are critical, and a hose can be, to drag a hose around back of the saw can mess up the cut. Plus, the general infrequent use of this type of a saw is just the inconvenience of setting up a dust hose. Is most of us, we didn't do it. Okay, we looked at price. Now, we included, obviously it's price at the time of this publication, but pricing is based on bare tools when available. And the reason why we looked at that, well, basically jigsaws are typically a secondary tool in one's tool arsenal. The highest price saw in the testing, you can guess it, Festool Carvex, sells for about $349. And you need an accessory kit if you want a bevel. That was about $250 for that accessory kit. We did not include pricing in our final score. So just want to let you guys know that. So, okay, who has the best cordless jigsaw? The best jigsaw went to, it was a tie. It was between Festool and Makita with 12 points. Festool earned strong scores in speed, power, vibration, and scroll cutting and tracking accuracy. Makita had strong showings in ergonomics features, scroll cutting and tracking. While the numbers tell a story, the subjective feel of a tool can also mean something. During this testing, there were 2 saws that the crew kept talking about as being the nicest to operate, the nicest feel, the smoothest, the least vibration. And that was the Makita and the Hilti in that order, with Makita being the crew favorite. A close second place went to DeWalt in this test, this entire test. So DeWalt took a close second place at 14 points. It scored tops in features, earned high marks in vibration and ergonomics. The 3rd place score went to the Hilti, and Milwaukee came in 4th place. Now, it wouldn't be a head-to-head if we didn't talk about best value jigsaw, and that goes to the DeWalt. It was a top performer in this testing, great price, making this saw the best value jigsaw. Now guys, to conclude, all of our pro contractor team put some serious time and effort into our head-to-head, and we want to do that to bring you the most comprehensive information available. These tests and evaluations are difficult to do, they take a ton of time, and ultimately are limited in scope, and we're not a professional testing tool company. So we have limited time to evaluate these tools. We cannot do long-term testing. I do have a video series where I do look backs, but I can't do them on all these saws. And we cannot possibly test every application that you might want to test these saws on. So look, we get lots of comments on how we do our final rankings. Some agree, some disagree. As we've stated before, there are hundreds of ways to test tools. The good news is, in our charts and graphs, we share all our information. All of our data is there. If you don't like how we rank something, you don't care how we scored a particular category, no problem. Simply remove that item from the matrix and re-rank them. Come up with your own score. Hopefully, this head-to-head will be useful when comparing compact miter saws, and you can use it as a buyer's guide if you like, or to confirm your price, your saw that you purchased. If you have a moment, guys, please check out our other head-to-heads, and if you enjoyed this video, just give us a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Subscribe, hit that notification bell right there. The notification bell helps support our YouTube ranking and will help notify you when we publish new videos. That's it, guys. We'll see you next time here at Toolbox Buzz.